Have you ever begged life to stay the same, only to realize the harder you grip, the more you suffer? Have you ever looked back and seen that the change you resisted was the change that quietly saved you? Welcome back to the channel, my friend. Today we are going to talk about the law of impermanence, one of the most direct and life-changing teachings in Buddhism. Not as a philosophy you repeat when things are calm, but as a living truth you can use when life is shaking, when the heart is aching, when the mind is spinning, and when the future feels uncertain. Impermanence means everything changes. Your body changes. Your thoughts change. Your relationships change. Your seasons change. Your plans change. The world changes. Even the emotions that feel permanent are changing while you are feeling them. This is not meant to be depressing. It is meant to be liberating. Because if you truly see impermanence, you stop demanding that life behave like a stone statue. You stop fighting the river. You stop turning every shift into a personal betrayal. And here is the part most people miss. Impermanence is not only the reason things end. Impermanence is also the reason pain can end. Impermanence is the reason grief moves in waves rather than staying at full force forever. Impermanence is the reason a stuck chapter can open. Impermanence is the reason you are not trapped inside your worst day. So if you have ever felt like life is unfair, impermanence gives you honesty. If you have ever felt like you are doomed, impermanence gives you a door. If you have ever felt terrified of aging, impermanence gives you a wiser way to measure your life. And if you have ever felt anxious about destiny, impermanence shows you that destiny is not a frozen script. Destiny is a stream shaped by causes, karma, and the choices you practice again and again. Let me start with a story, because the mind can argue with ideas, but the heart cannot argue with a lived scene. There was a person named Claire. She had built a life that looked stable from the outside. She knew her routine. She knew her role. She knew what was expected. She knew how to be useful. And because she knew these things, she felt safe. Not deeply safe, not spiritually safe, but safe enough to function without too many questions. Then life changed. It was not a dramatic movie scene. No thunder, no perfect soundtrack. It was something ordinary that carried extraordinary weight. A meeting that ended her job. A message that ended a relationship. A medical appointment that changed a timeline. A family shift that rearranged everything she thought was dependable. It could have been any of these. The details matter, but the feeling is the same. The feeling is that the ground moved under her feet. At first, her mind tried to deny it. Denial is not stupidity. Denial is the nervous system trying to protect itself from too much reality too fast. The mind says this cannot be happening because if it is happening, I do not know who I am. Then, the denial cracks, and the fear comes. Claire sits on the edge of her bed and feels her chest tighten. She tries to breathe, but the breath feels shallow. Her mind starts racing. The mind does what minds do when they cannot control an event. It tries to control the meaning. It asks why. It blames someone. It blames herself. It searches for a way to reverse time. It creates 1,000 possible futures, and most of them are terrible. This is where suffering multiplies. Not because change happened, but because the mind insists change should not happen. Claire tells herself she just needs to figure it out. She tells herself she needs the reason. She tells herself she needs a plan that guarantees safety. She believes that if she can lock down the future, she can relax. But the future is not a locked door you can bolt shut. The future is a living thing. And the more you try to control a living thing, the more tension you create. She keeps trying anyway, because fear feels like responsibility. She scrolls. She searches. She compares. She replays. She imagines conversation. She rehearses worst outcome. She tries to prepare by suffering in advance, and it exhausts her. A few days later, she meets a friend for coffee. The friend listens without interrupting. That alone is rare. Many people listen only long enough to offer advice. But this friend simply listens. When Claire finally pauses, the friend asks a question that sounds simple but changes everything. What part of this change hurts the most? The event itself, or the fact that it is proving you cannot control life the way you thought you could? Claire feels something tighten again. But this time, it is not only fear, it is recognition. She realizes the change is painful. Yes, but the deeper pain is the collapse of an illusion. The illusion that life can be made permanent through effort. The illusion that if you do everything correctly, life will promise stability. The illusion that identity is fixed. The friend says quietly, I know this feels like loss, but it is also a moment of truth. You are meeting impermanence directly. This is where wisdom can start, if you let it. Claire does not know how to let it. She only knows she is tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of thinking. Tired of clenching her whole life. She wants relief, not philosophy. So the friend suggests something practical. Not a big program. Not a complicated method. Just one simple practice. Every time you feel the panic rise, name what is happening. Say, change is here. Then take one slow breath. Then ask, what is one small wise step I can take right now? Claire thinks it sounds too small, but she is tired enough to try. That night, the panic rises again. The mind tries to drag her into the future. The mind says, what if everything falls apart? What if you never recover? What if you are too late? She feels her jaw clench. She feels the familiar urge to grab her phone and search. She feels the urge to force certainty. Then she remembers the practice. She says quietly, change is here. It does not fix the situation, but it changes her relationship to the situation. It stops her from pretending change is a crime. It names reality. Then she takes one slow breath. She does not force calm. She simply gives the nervous system a signal of care. Then she asks, what is one small wise step right now? Not what is the whole plan. Not how do I control the next 10 years. Right now. The wise step is simple. Drink water. Turn off the phone. Lie down. Rest the eyes. Let the body recover a little so the mind can be clearer tomorrow. That is karma in action. A small cause that creates a better condition. The next day, Claire is still in a hard season, but she is slightly less flooded. She can think more clearly. She can take another small step. A comb, a conversation, a practical task, a walk, a moment of stillness. And this is how impermanence begins to reveal its gift, not as a sweet feeling, but as a new way to live. Because the gift of impermanence is not that nothing lasts. The gift is that nothing lasts, including the mental prisons we build. Now let us go deeper. Because impermanence is not only about external change, it is also about internal change. And that is where liberation is most real. Most people suffer because they treat thoughts and emotions as solid truth. If anxiety arises, they believe they are anxious people. If sadness arises, they believe life is hopeless. If anger arises, they believe they must act on it. But Buddhism teaches that these inner experiences are also impermanent. A thought arises due to conditions and passes. An emotion arises due to conditions and passes. A mood rises like weather and shifts. When you do not understand this, you merge with whatever you feel. You become it. You lose your center. You get pulled around by every wave. When you do understand impermanence, you can feel deeply without drowning. You can grieve without turning grief into identity. You can fear without letting fear drive the car. You can be disappointed without making disappointment into destiny. This is one of the greatest gifts of impermanence. It gives you space between awareness and experience. Now, some people hear impermanence and think it sounds cold, like nothing matters. But Buddhism does not teach that nothing matters. It teaches that everything matters more because it is changing. Think about it. If you believed a moment would last forever, you might not cherish it. If you believed a conversation would always be available, you might postpone saying what matters. If you believed a loved one would always be here, you might take them for granted. Impermanence sharpens love. Not the clinging kind of love, but the awake kind of love. The love that says, since this is not guaranteed, I will be present now. I will speak kindly now. I will forgive sooner. I will waste less time on hatred. I will stop postponing what matters. This is where impermanence becomes compassion. Now let us bring in another core teaching that sits beside impermanence like a twin. Non-attachment. Non-attachment does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop turning life into possession. You stop gripping. You stop demanding that what is changing must stay. Attachment is the mind saying, if this changes, I cannot survive. If this ends, I am nothing. If this shifts, I will be destroyed. Impermanence says, it will change. Non-attachment says, and you can still be okay. You can still breathe. You can still practice. You can still plant new seeds. This is not denial. This is training. Now let us talk about karma. Because karma explains why impermanence can feel like suffering for one person and like freedom for another. Karma is the law with cause and effect. Not in a childish reward and punishment sense, but in a practical sense. Your repeated intentions, words, and actions shape your mind. Your mind shapes your life. When change happens, your response becomes a cause. The cause creates the next condition. The next condition influences your next response. Over time, this becomes your destiny. So impermanence is not just something that happens to you. It is also something you work with. The question is, what causes are you planting as life changes? If you respond to change with bitterness, you plant bitterness. Bitterness becomes a lens. Through that lens, every future change feels like proof of betrayal. If you respond to change with avoidance, you plant avoidance. Avoidance becomes habit. Then life becomes smaller and fear becomes larger. If you respond to change with mindful acceptance, you plant clarity. Clarity gives you choices. Choices give you direction. If you respond to change with compassion, you plant warmth. Warmth builds relationships. Relationships become support. Support becomes resilience. This is how impermanence becomes a gift. It forces you to notice what seeds you are planting, and it gives you endless chances to plant differently. Now let us return to Claire, because I want you to see how a person actually changes through this teaching. Weeks pass. Claire has good days and bad days. This is important. Awakening is not a straight line. Practice is not a perfect mood. Practice is a repeated return. Some days she wakes up and the fear hits hard. The old identity tries to return. The old story says, you are falling apart, but now she has a tool. She says, change is here. She breathes. She says, this feeling is a passing condition. Then she asks, what is one wise step? On hard days, the wise step might be very small. A shower, a meal, a short walk, a kind message to a friend, a moment of sitting quietly without feeding the mind. On better days, the wise step might be bigger. Applying for something, learning something, asking for help, setting a boundary, letting go of something that is clearly no longer healthy. Over time, Claire begins to notice something that surprises her. She is not only surviving change, she is becoming different. She becomes less reactive. She becomes less desperate to control everything. She becomes more honest about what she wants. She becomes more respectful of her own needs. She becomes more compassionate toward others because she can see how everyone is dealing with change, even if they hide it. She also becomes more grateful, but not in a forced way. Grateful in a real way. She notices simple things again. The sound of rain, the taste of tea, a warm conversation, the feeling of sunlight. She realizes she used to rush past these moments, chasing a future that never arrived. Impermanence gave her back the present. Now, this is where many people feel emotional resistance. They say, Are you telling me I should be grateful for losing something? Are you telling me my pain is a gift? No. We are not romanticizing pain. We are saying something more subtle and more mature. Change itself is neutral. What you do with change determines whether it becomes suffering or wisdom. Some losses are tragic. Some changes are unfair. Buddhism does not deny that. It simply says you have a choice about whether you will add the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain. The second arrow is the mental war. The second arrow is the refusal to accept reality. The second arrow is the story that says this should not be happening. I cannot handle it. It proves I am doomed. Impermanence helps you put down the second arrow. Because once you truly see that everything changes, you stop expecting life to behave like a contract. You stop being shocked by change. You stop being personally offended by reality. This reduces suffering more than most people imagine. Now let us explore the gifts of change more directly, because this is what can transform your relationship with time. Gift 1. Change reveals what you are clinging to. When life is stable, you can hide your attachments. You can pretend you are calm. But when something shifts, you see the truth. You see where you depend on control. You see where you depend on approval. You see where you depend on certainty. You see where you depend on identity. This revelation is painful, but it is also the beginning of freedom. You cannot release what you cannot see. Gift 2. Change forces presence. When things break, the mind cannot ego-pilot as easily. You wake up, you notice. Even if you notice through pain, you are awake. And once you are awake, you can choose differently. Gift 3. Change humbles the ego. The ego loves to believe it is in charge. Change reminds you that you are part of condition, not master of condition. This humility can soften you, open you, make you kinder, make you less obsessed with proving. Gift 4. Change trains compassion. When you suffer, you understand suffering in others. If you allow suffering to open your heart rather than harden it, you become more compassionate. Compassion is not a mood. Compassion is the strength to stay kind in a changing world. Gift 5. Change reshapes destiny through new seeds. When an old path ends, you are forced to plant new causes, new habits, new choices, new values. This can create a destiny you never would have chosen if you stayed comfortable. Now, there is a deeper Buddhist teaching inside Impermanence that can sound strange at first, but it is one of the most liberating insights you can have. The insight is that the self is also changing. Many people suffer because they treat identity as fixed. They say, I am this kind of person. I am anxious. I am broken. I am not good enough. I am always behind. I am the one who fails. I am the one who gets abandoned. These identity statements feel solid, but they are often built from repeated thoughts and memories. They are conditioned. They can change. If you can see that identity is also impermanent, you stop imprisoning yourself. You realize you can become someone else through practice. Not someone fake, but someone freer, someone steadier, someone kinder, someone wiser. This is why Buddhism puts so much emphasis on practice. Practice is how you shape conditions. You cannot freeze impermanence, but you can cultivate the mind that meets impermanence with wisdom. Now I want to bring impermanence into a very common human fear. Aging is impermanence made visible. People fear aging because it confronts the fantasy of permanence. The body changes, energy changes, appearance changes, roles change. The world treats you differently. If you fight aging, you suffer. If you accept impermanence, you can age with dignity. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop measuring worth by what time will change anyway. When you accept impermanence, you can ask a wiser question. Since time will change my body, what can I cultivate that grows deeper with time? Compassion can grow. Wisdom can grow. Patience can grow. Presence can grow. Generosity can grow. These are not dependent on youth. These are dependent on practice. This is where impermanence becomes a spiritual advantage. It forces you to invest in what time cannot easily steal. Now let us talk about relationships. Relationships change. People grow. People have moods. People have seasons. People heal and regress. People become different. If you cling to a fixed image of someone, you suffer. If you accept impermanence, you can love the living person in front of you rather than the memory you are trying to preserve. This does not mean you accept harm. Boundaries still matter. Wisdom still matters. But you stop demanding that love be a guarantee. You stop demanding that closeness be permanent. You stop demanding that people never disappoint you. When you stop demanding, you love more cleanly. And ironically, cleaner love often creates more real closeness, because it is less controlling. Now let us talk about fear, because fear is often the mind fighting impermanence. Fear says, if things change, I will not survive. Impermanence says, things will change, and you can cultivate skills to meet change. That is the Buddhist approach. Not false security, but real capability. The capability is built from practice. Mindfulness, the ability to notice without collapsing. Compassion, the ability to stay kind without becoming bitter. The ability to see the second arrow and set it down. Right effort, the ability to act without forcing. Karma awareness, the ability to plant wise causes. These are the tools that make impermanence feel like freedom rather than terror. Now I want to share a story that shows impermanence not as theory but as a turning point. Because many people only truly understand impermanence after a loss. There was an older man named Samuel. He had been married for decades. His wife was the person who made the house feel like home. She did not have to do anything dramatic. Her presence was the warmth. Her routines were the rhythm. Her small kindness were the glue. Then she passed away. The first months were brutal. Samuel felt like the world had lost color. He would reach for things in the house and feel the absence like a physical weight. He would hear silence and feel it as pain. He would wake up and forget for half a second. Then remember. People tried to comfort him with words. Time heals. Stay strong. Everything happens for a reason. None of those words touched the reality of his grief. Then one afternoon, Samuel found an old note his wife had left in a drawer. It was not a dramatic letter. It was a simple note about a small household thing. But seeing her handwriting broke him open. He sat on the floor and cried in a way he had not allowed himself to cry in years. After the tears slowed, he sat there for a long time. And something quiet happened. He realized his grief was love. Grief was love meeting impermanence. That realization did not remove pain, but it gave pain a different shape. He stopped treating grief as an enemy. He stopped trying to force it away. He let it move through him. And as he did, he began noticing the waves. Some days were rushing. Some days were lighter. Some moments were calm. Then a smell, a memory would bring a wave back. At first he thought the return of grief meant he was failing. Then he remembered impermanence. Waves come and go. The sea has weather. This is not failure. This is life. That understanding gave him patience with himself. Then he began practicing something else. He began turning grief into compassion. When he saw someone else struggling, he could feel their pain more clearly. He became kinder, not as a performance, but because his heart had been broken open. He began to volunteer at a community place. He began to speak to younger people with a softness he did not have before. Years later, Samuel still missed his wife. Impermanence does not erase love, but he was not destroyed. He had integrated loss into wisdom. He had let grief become compassion rather than bitterness. This is a gift of impermanence, not the loss itself, but the way impermanence can train the heart to become deeper. Now let me be clear. This is not automatic. Some people become bitter after loss. Some people become hard. Some people become cynical. That is also a karmic response. It is a set of seeds planted after change. So the real question is not whether impermanence will visit you. It will. The real question is what you will practice when it does. If you practice clinging, you suffer more. If you practice acceptance, you suffer less. If you practice compassion, you transform. If you practice wisdom, you awaken. Now let us bring this into a very practical daily life moment. Because if a teaching cannot touch your ordinary day, it is not yet alive. Imagine you have a plan. You are excited. Then the plan changes. Someone cancels. Something breaks. A delay happen. Your mind immediately reacts. It says, "This is wrong. This should not be happening. I am behind. I am disrespected. I am unlucky." If you believe this story, your whole day is affected. Impermanence practice is noticing the reaction and remembering. Plans are conditioned. Conditions change. This is not personal. Then you ask, what is the wise step? Maybe the wise step is adjusting the schedule. Maybe it is resting. Maybe it is using the time differently. Maybe it is reaching out calmly. Maybe it is letting go. When you do this, your nervous system learns a new lesson. Change does not equal danger. Change equals change. I can respond. This training makes you more resilient, and resilience is a form of freedom. Now let us talk about why people resist impermanence so strongly. Because understanding resistance is part of compassion. People resist impermanence because impermanence threatens control. Control feels like safety. Many people learned early that safety depended on predicting moods, managing outcomes, performing well, staying useful, not making mistakes. Control became a survival strategy. So when impermanence shows up, the nervous system does not just feel inconvenience, it feels threat. This is why practice must be gentle. If you try to accept impermanence by force, you will just create a new war. You will force yourself to be spiritual, and that is still clinging. Instead, practice begins with kindness toward your own fear. Of course, impermanence scares you. You are human. You want stability. You want love. You want safety. Then you teach the nervous system something new through small repeated experiences. You show it that you can survive uncertainty. You show it that you can breathe and change. You show it that you can take one wise step at a time. This is the path. Now I want to offer a reflection that can serve as a daily compass. Because impermanence can feel abstract until you live it daily. When something changes today, even something small, try asking yourself this. What is changing right now? And what am I adding to it? What is changing might be a schedule, a mood, a plan, a conversation, a feeling in the body. What you are adding might be a story of personal failure, a story of rejection, a story of doom, a story of being behind. Then ask, can I let the change be change without adding the second arrow? If you can, even once, you will feel a new kind of peace. Now, I want to close with something that often creates deep resonance. The idea that impermanence is not only about loss, it is also about possibility. If everything were permanent, you would be trapped. If a painful emotion were permanent, you would be condemned. If a hard season were permanent, you would have no hope. If a harmful habit were permanent, you could never change. If a mistake were permanent, you would never be forgiven. Impermanence is the reason healing is possible. Impermanence is the reason awakening is possible. Impermanence is the reason you can begin again. And because you can begin again, your destiny is not only what happened yesterday. Your destiny is what you practice today. That is the Buddhist gift of change. So if you are facing change right now, let me offer you one simple sentence to carry. This is a changing moment, and I can meet it with awareness, compassion, and one wise step. You do not have to solve your whole life today. You do not have to force certainty. You do not have to pretend it does not hurt. You only have to breathe and plant one seed. Now I would love to hear from you. What change are you facing? And what would it look like to treat impermanence not as an enemy, but as a teacher that can guide you toward wisdom and a freer heart? Share your story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, hit like, and consider becoming a member so we can keep creating long, honest teachings together. Until next time, keep practicing, keep breathing, and keep walking the path with compassion.